Focus on the day. Focus on one day. That day being today. Because if you get too caught up with what I'm going to do in the next few months, weeks, months, my 5-year plan, you can have a 5-year plan, you can have a 10-year plan and all that, but it means nothing if you don't have an idea of what you want to achieve today.
You are now listening to the Highlight Reel Builder for Authors, the Going North podcast. I'm your host, certified self-leadership trainer and author of the best-selling book, Stay the Course, Dom Brightmon. And you're going to be getting some goodies today from the guest that's up next. Today's episode is sponsored by the GoingNorthPodcast.com shop. Head over to that wonderful website to pick up some merchandise. We got shirts, hoodies, mugs, t-shirts, flags, notebooks, journals, just about almost everything under the sun, even stickers and buttons indeed for your lanyards and for your decorations as well. And we got multiple designs, advance others to advance yourself. We got the GoingNorthPodcast.com logo as well as outread your competition to outlead your competition. And we even got bags too, so check out the wonderful podcast merch shop and be on the lookout for sales. They got wonderful 35% off sales spread out throughout every single month, so that way you can save even more money, so you can get more bang for your buck, so you can bang out your goals through the inspiration you're going to get today on this podcast. Check it out like a library book, my friends. And today on the Highlight Reel Builder for Authors, known as the Going North podcast, we got another super special, awesome human for you today. That's right, indeed, courtesy of Podmatch.com, where podcast guests get to meet podcast hosts. And if they're cool, they're in. Well, today's guest is cooler than 3 cucumbers. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. It's usually cooler than 2, but today's guest is cooler than 3 because he is an international best-selling author who has over 30 directional awards under his belt. So he's a decorated champion, y'all, and is regarded as the most outstanding teacher and consultant on the art of film directing. So let's give it up for the one, the only MWT, the one and only mighty, wonderful, and terrific Mark W. Travis. How you doing today, Mark?
I'm doing great, Dom, and I'm so glad we're recording this because I want to listen to that introduction a few times. That was beautifully done, by the way. Thank you. Thank you. And it's an honor to be here with you, my friend.
Sweet. Yes, indeed. It's usually one of the better parts of the show before rabbit holes appear.
Yeah. Good idea. Start out rich, start out high, and see how long you can keep it up there.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So my goodness, I'm sure there's been some folks living under probably 5 rocks nowadays, thanks to folks trying to dodge social media, and they probably don't know all of what my man, the mighty Mark, has to offer. So mind giving us a bit of your backstory for the folks who have not heard about you yet since your first time on the show?
Yes. My backstory is very typical, I think, very universal in the fact that it's a career that went the way it wasn't supposed to go. And I had other plans. My plans, once I went through college and I was a theater major and I was directing theater, I went to graduate school, Yale School of Drama, to pursue theater directing. Then I made the choice, mistake or not, of moving to Los Angeles. Now, Los Angeles is not a theater town. I quickly, and sort of painfully realized that my training, especially Yale and MFA program, meant nothing to the people in the. They did not want to hear about that. I said, I studied at Yale. Well, I studied at Yale, and to make it doubly worse, I studied at Yale and I studied theater. I was in a film town, so I had to start learning all over again because I was really interested in getting into film. And there are a lot of ways I eventually did get into film through directing sitcoms like Family Ties, Facts of Life, directing soap operas and things like that, things that were actually in a way closer to theater than they were to feature filmmaking. But then through a long story, which I won't bore you with now, I got my first feature film assignment, feature film assignment. Oh, I got it primarily because I controlled another property, another that the studio wanted. This is Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers wanted a property that I had developed, that I had created with a friend of mine. And they wanted that as a feature film. And I said, no, you can't have it. But they would keep having meetings with me. So consequently, I sold them on the idea of another film, which two other friends of mine had written. And that film happened, and we made it. And that's a long story, which I won't bore with you with. Going through your first feature film with a major studio, it's painful. It's, that you're in the middle of a jungle, a real jungle. And as the head of the studio, Bob Daly told me after everything was finished and the film was finished and all that, and he told me in very few words, Mark, you were just at the wrong place at the wrong time, which had nothing to do with the film, had nothing to do with the quality of the film. It had to do with the politics of studio politics, and the wars between studio executives that I got caught in the middle of. So suddenly I couldn't get another job. And to survive, because I had a wife, I had a child, I said, I have to bring in money somehow. I went back to something that I had done a little bit earlier, which is teaching. Earlier, I had taught theater directing, but I went back and started teaching acting classes, and I started teaching directing classes. And ironically, which I'm sure you can understand, those of you who are anywhere close to this business, because of my background was theater still. Even though I directed television, I directed a feature film, my foundation was theater. Everything I was teaching came from theater. And suddenly, Dom, I was very popular. Not popular as, let's hire him to direct this. Popular, let's hire him to help this other director who we've already hired, who doesn't know anything about directing, help Mark. Mark will help him become a better director. So suddenly I became the teaching director, or as they called it then, the director's director. I would be brought in. The Directors Guild, which I'm a member of, hired me to come in and teach A-list directors how to work with actors, things like that. So suddenly, this is where the career takes a big shift. My directing career became a teaching career. The teaching career then shifted because I got a call from, I'm trying to remember what it was called. I think it was called Showbiz Expo back then. This big exposition in Los Angeles, all about filmmaking, all about the equipment. And they called me, I didn't know them at all, and I didn't think they knew me, if I would come in and do a one-day seminar on film directing. Well, I had directed one film that did not go well at all. And I'm thinking, and why are they asking me? Finally, I asked them. They said, well, we called the Directors Guild to ask them who we should hire. And they recommended me. They recommended because I was teaching there, not because I'd made a successful film. So I agreed to this. Now, this is a very long story what happened. By the end of that teaching, I did that full day, and it was painful, and I swore to God I would never do it again because I felt so out of my league. I didn't know what I was doing. Before I left the convention center, I had 2 offers from 2 publishers to write a book. Now, all of a sudden, the teaching career is a writing career, an author career. First of all, I turned them both down. And they both came back. And then I tried to put the 2 of them together. For a while it was together, but eventually ended up with one. And I said, okay, I'll write the book. Fine, I'll write the book. It took me 2 years to write the book. And you got to be careful when you write a book, which is sort of a how-to book. I wrote a book called The Director's Journey. And got to be thinking about what you're doing. Because if that book gets published, and this would get published because the publisher's hiring me to do this, it's going to be read by a lot of people. And if it's a good publisher, a credible publisher, it will go not just in your neighborhood or your city or your state. It'll probably go worldwide. My book went worldwide. Now, this is the book, which I can tell you a little bit later, that became, on the first week of its release, the #1 bestseller at the LA Times. I promised Dom before we started I would tell that story if you want it, Dom. But let's move on beyond that. When people around the world read a book, not just if you're writing a novel or something, that's great. But if you're writing a book about how to do something that a lot of people want to do, suddenly you get phone calls and you get emails. And I made the mistake of putting my email and address and my phone number in the book. Ooh. Now I'm getting calls not just from around, but from Europe, from Japan, from around the, would you come here and teach? And suddenly the directing career that went to a teaching career, that went to an author's career, has gone back to an expanded teaching career. And way in the back of my mind, I'm saying, what happened to my directing? Although, ironically, and this is true, almost every day I'm directing. I'm talking about it. I'm teaching it, like even today, I'm talking about, and I realize in many ways I'm doing more directing than most directors are. Most directors, like a feature film, will do one film every 2 or 3 years or something like that. I'm doing it every single day. I'm working with students. I'm teaching students. I'm consulting on films. I'm doing all of that. So I say, okay, I'm almost directing. I'm like that far away from directing. I'm really close to directing. And now, because of all those requests, I am traveling all over the world, teaching. But to get back to the writing part of it, my publisher, because the book is doing fine, felt that, as I'm sure you know, Dom, and a lot of you out there know much better than I do, the publishing world. He says, okay, we need the second edition. Now, my first book was 300 pages long, and I'm looking at this thing. And one thing, to be really transparent, the last thing I want to do is read the book. I do not want to read this book. I don't want to go through and say, what would I change? What would I take out? And I'm sure you understand this, Dom. What would I change? I kept saying to the publisher, Michael Weesey is the publisher. I kept saying, no, I can't do that. No, I mean, it was painful enough to write it the first time. And now I'm going to have to go back and revisit the cadaver or something and try to revive that. No. So I made him a deal. I said, listen, I'll write another 100 pages, just 100 pages, called an addendum to the book. I'm not going to read the book again, but I'll write a new 100 pages. Now, this is 5 years after it came out. So I said, because things have changed, what I'm teaching, because of the teaching, which one of your guests, Dom, that I listened to earlier, was talking about how the teaching, you're learning more than your students are very often. So I had learned a lot. So I wrote another 100 pages. And there's a lot in those other 100 pages that is contradictory to what's in the original material, but we did not change the original materials. So it became an interesting book. Here's the main part of the book. And then 5 years later, I come back and I write that. So now, and it got a new title, which may or may not have been a good idea. I don't know. But the new title is Directing Feature Films. So that's the book that's out now. And it contains both the director's journey and all this new material. So that came out, did not hit the bestseller list. And I'll tell you why the first one did. That came out. Then, because we're talking about books here, Dom, many years later, and again, this has to do with my publisher, Michael Weesey, who lives, when I wrote the first book, he lived in Los Angeles, where I was living. And now he lives in Cornwall, England, and I'm living in Hawaii. We're very far apart. But I was in Cornwall by the invitation of the Cornwall Arts Council, teaching a directing workshop. And Michael was there sort of as a student, because he loved taking my classes. And as I was teaching these directors how to work with actors, I kept saying to them, I'm going to say, okay, you're having a problem here. I'm going to show you a trick. Now, these are things I've learned from years and years and years of being a theater director, still directing theater, still directing film, still directing television a little bit, but also teaching a lot. I would develop shortcuts, tricks that would work. And so a lot of my career has been about developing new techniques of working with actors. So I would say to the director, here's a trick. Let me show you a trick. And we were doing it on camera. Sometimes it had to do with the camera. Sometimes it had to do with staging. Sometimes it had to do with just the final direction you give to the actor. And suddenly the scene would work. And Michael was sitting there and he said to me, Mark, that's your next book. I go, what? And right away, I had this resistance, like, oh, no, not another book. What? I don't want to write another book. And wait, Dom, till I get to the third book. Now we're talking about the second book. The first two together is one book. Okay, so he said, that's about all these tricks. And I thought about it for a while. I said, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. Well, because of who I am, I ended up doing it. I ended up writing it. So the second book is called The Film Director's Bag of Tricks. And it actually is very subtle, very powerful techniques that we as directors use with writers and actors in terms to get what we want from them. And it's not how to force them to do anything. But this is the psychology of directing. It's how to get that writer or that actor around their resistance, around their fears, around their problems, or around their embarrassment, whatever's in the way of them seeing possibly another way of looking at this moment, at this scene, and how to do that. So as I talk about when I'm teaching directing, half of directing is all the directing skills that anybody can teach you that you could learn. The other half is psychology. Can you work with human beings, individuals, writers, directors, producers, all of those people, even podcast hosts? You fit in there, Dom, somewhere. How we as creatives work with the other creatives. That's a skill that takes time to develop. And that's what this book is really all about. And as my wife said, she says, this is really a book on how to survive life, how to survive anybody you're dealing with, neighbors and family and all that. And I said, yeah. In fact, she loves the book. And sometimes she'll hear me in a conversation with somebody and she'll look at me and go, tricks, right? I go, yeah, that's one of them. That's what you just saw was one of them. And anyway, so that's the second book. So now these two books are out. They're still published worldwide. I still get calls. But here's something, because I know I'm talking on and on here, Dom. I haven't given you a chance, but I'm going to give you a moment here. I want to talk for a second about the third book, which is really interesting. There's a technique that I've developed. The package of all these techniques is called the Travis technique. These are techniques for film directors, how to work with actors, how to direct the whole film. And there are a lot of techniques within it. One of it is the staging, power of staging. It's also the power of storytelling. But an important part of it is working with actors, how to get the actors to give you the performances that they want, that you want. And literally how to get the actor's mind, this is a little tricky, so hold on, to shut down and get out of the way. Because it's the actor's mind, the actor's thinking that is an obstacle to both you and the actor. And this technique is called the interrogation process. I can interrogate the character that lives inside an actor and stimulate that character to come out authentically without the interference of the actor. Literally, the actor does not interfere at all. And on a side note, which we can talk about anytime you want, Dom, is how I also use this technique with writers to help them experience and meet and discover the characters they're writing without the interference of the writer who wants to control it. So this is a very powerful technique that I've been teaching for years all around the world. A lot of people are using this technique, and that was meant to be the third book. The third book is all on the interrogation technique and some of these other techniques that are closely aligned with it. And Elsha, my wife, said to me, well, it was a couple of years ago, how long will it take you if you go on sabbatical from I'm self-employed? It's just basically telling everybody, no, I'm not working. Sabbatical, how long would it take you to write that book? And I had to think about it. I said, okay, I think a year. I think I could do it in a year. If that was all I was doing, which is really hard to imagine, that's all I'm doing. I mean, for any artist, they say, what, you're going to just do one thing for a year? That's painful. But I said a year. She says, okay, let's do it. So we started to work on it. And I sat down and outlined the book. I started outlining the book. But immediately, which I knew, and Elsha knew this too, I said, okay, this is not going to work. It's not going to work because it's a book. It's words on a page. It's not going to work because it's words on a page. I'm trying to describe something that you will see in an actor as I'm working with him. How can I describe that? How can I? When I teach it, it's easy. I'm working with actors in front of people and they can see it. There's a dynamic that happens between me and the actors and you can see the character emerge. So I said, okay, this book is going to have to be an electronic book because there's going to have to be a lot of video clips that go with it. So as I'm describing something, you look at that clip and then you can see it. So it's it's closer to the way I work. And so we worked on that for a while. Now we're just on the outline process. I'm not writing a lot, but I am writing a lot because I'm outlining it. And then I started to look at it and go, my God, it's becoming more video than text. More video. And I'm thinking, this thing is growing into this monster. And I remember saying to Elsha, one day we had a friend over visiting, and we were talking about it. I said, it's huge. It's huge. I'm not sure how I'm going to tackle this at all because it just seems out of control. And I think it was Elsha asked me, she says, okay, can you describe one of the videos, just one video that you want to make? I said, okay. And I said, here's the video I want to do. I want to take two actors, one scene, and I will interrogate them with this process several times during this video. And each time you will see how the scene changes because of the interrogation process. In other words, you can actually see it happen. If it's this interrogation gave you these results, this interrogation, and these results, and there'll be no traditional directing. It won't be, I asked them to do it a certain way and all that. It's all based on how does this one part of the process affect the result? And Elsha said, fine. How long would it take to do that, to shoot that? And I said, 2 days. She says, okay, let's do it. Now that's Elsha. She says, let's do it. She says, I'll pay for it. And she pulled out the calendar. She picked dates. How about these 2 days? Suddenly, we did it. We shot it for 2 days. Now, this was like 7 years ago. We shot it for 2 days. We had gone through the scene 30 times. We had 30 different versions of the scene. Plus, very importantly, after each version, not every single one, but after a few interviews with the actors. So you could hear, the actors could share what they had experienced. You could see what they experienced. And so there's a lot, and we're shooting with 3 cameras, so we don't have to try to cover things. Everything's covered. And so we had a lot of video material. It took us about 5 years to figure out how to edit it together. But that is the beginning of the third book, that video, the video, which is, if anybody wants to see that, I'd be happy to show it. It's on our website, which is, I think you're listing, it's called TIFI, TIFI.US, Travis International Film Institute.US. And you can see that the film is there. You can watch it. But that, getting back to writing, Dom, what's happened to me is now I feel I'm creating videos all the time. Every day I'm creating videos. Even these podcasts are videos. Because I said the video, even what I explained here, I'd rather not write it. I'd rather just tell you and say, there it is, and let the world hear it. So, but it's still creating a book, but it's creating this massive compendium or whatever it is of video material to try to cover this one main subject. So that's the third book. I don't see it ever coming out of a book. I do see it as videos with perhaps workbooks or study guides or things like that. And now I'm going to stop talking, Dom, because I see you on the screen. You're very, very, very polite. And I've listened to a lot of your podcasts and I love listening to you. So, but now I'm talking and I'm not listening to you. So I'm going to listen.
Hey, it's all good. It's all good. As I like to say, when the wise speak, I like to listen. And you dropped a whole bunch of great nuggets within those multiple stories all tied in together. It's like, one thing that sticks out to me is the fact that you chose the right woman to marry, it seems like, who's actually holding you accountable to getting work done like that. And just like, oh, it's not like, hey, just do this thing. It's like, all right, so here's the calendar. We're going to choose these 2 dates. We're going to get this thing done here, which is really beautiful. So my goodness, with all of that wisdom, I guess, is there anything else that keeps you going? Is there like another internal motivation besides your love of creativity and just always getting better?
Yeah, there is. I have to tell you another story. And this happened about a year and a half ago. And Elsha and I were living in Los Angeles. And I lived most of my life in Los Angeles. I met Elsha in Hawaii. And she left Hawaii, her favorite place to live in the world, to come live with me in the desert of Los Angeles. But anyway, we're living there and we're working there. And this is right after COVID, on the tail end. Well, not the tail end, because we're in the tail end now, but it's about a year and a half ago. And I had just finished a project and I was tired. We were both tired from all that. And I was sitting there and I realized, Dom, that I had been living in Los Angeles for 50 years, 50 years. And my first thought was, that's too long. That's too long to live in one place. I mean, and also Los Angeles I'm not infatuated with Los Angeles. I'm certainly not infatuated with Hollywood. I'm on the outskirts of Hollywood. I'm on the outlier, as they say. I am a disruptor the way I teach and what I teach many times disrupts the system. So, and I'm aware of that. That's fine. So I just do what I'm going to do. So I don't feel like Los Angeles is my home. I was there because of the film and television industry, but during COVID, it was pretty much gone. And then during COVID, I had to shift all my teaching, because we used to travel all the time, to online. So I said to Elsha, 50 years, too long, we need to move. And Elsha, being Elsha, said, okay, where? Where would you like to move to? And ironically, I picked Amsterdam. And her first reaction was, okay, let's do it. And it's like, you got to be careful, especially around Elsha. You say, let's do this. She'll go, yep. And suddenly all the gears and wheels are moving. She has a brother who lives outside Amsterdam. He offered us an apartment and a car. And suddenly everything's happening. And we're thinking, okay, we're moving there. We're figuring out packing and shipping and all of that. Meanwhile, when we got married a few years earlier, we got married in Hawaii, and her daughter lives in Hawaii. And we had planned to come back to Hawaii to celebrate our wedding anniversary, Elsha's birthday, and sort of a family reunion, which was competing a little bit with going to Amsterdam. Almost, she said, okay, we'll go to Hawaii, come home for 2 or 3 days, and then fly to Amsterdam. I mean, it's just crazy. But during that, about a month before we were about to do all of that, through a series of circumstances, Elsha had an epiphany. Why are we moving to Amsterdam? And the epiphany was really, really simple. She said, we're going for this holiday, for this family reunion. We're spending a boatload of money to stay at a hotel. You realize that for that amount of money, we could have rented an apartment and stay there for 2 months? And I said, oh, yeah. Well, why don't we do that instead? Just stay for 2 months. She said, okay. So we started looking for an apartment, and we eventually, through a long series of events, we found something that would work. And suddenly we're going, why are we going to Amsterdam? We love Hawaii. So we moved to Hawaii, which is where I am now. But I'm going to answer your question. After all that work, the reason I told you all of that, there was a lot of, for me, Dom, a lot of reconsideration of what I'm doing. 50 years in Los Angeles. I wanted to go to Amsterdam because I had taught all over Europe. I have a lot of friends in Amsterdam. I have friends all over Europe. I wanted to be closer to them. So there was a good personal reason to go there. It's also a good personal reason to go to Hawaii, because this is where I met Elsha. I have a lot of friends here too. So I was in a reconsideration process. And during that, Dom, I had another epiphany. What I need to do for the rest of my teaching career, whatever that might be, I need to collect everything I've taught, get it recorded. It's what I call my legacy project. I'm trying to get everything I know recorded in the best way I can. And that, in a way, is the book again. The book is going to keep going. It's going to keep growing because, a lot of it's available right now on YouTube and all of that. And more will be available. I do a podcast with you. There's more that's available. And if you look on Film Courage, if you know anything like that, the number of interviews I've done at that place is huge. It's huge. And I go, great, it's out there. My goal is that I'm trying to reach a point where I can say to myself and to Elsha, I think I've done everything. I don't think that will ever happen. There'll always be something else I want to do. But so that's in terms of the drive to write, to communicate and actually collect information. That's what's keeping me going, because I love it when I can say to someone, check out this video. That'll give you the information. Well, look at these two together or whatever. I do courses. I just finished a 6-week course on the interrogation process, a very specific part of it. All of that will go, because it's all online. It'll all go on YouTube. It'll all be available to everybody. So that's what I'm doing now. So the project actually got bigger by trying to make it all, by trying to get to the end of something. So that's what I'm doing.
Hey, it's a beautiful thing.
And that's why I appreciate you, Dom, and people like you are doing what you're doing, because you give me opportunities to share these ideas with your audience, but also sort of collect it. There's another podcast. There's another place you can go look.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Want to build up that highlight reel. In this case, build up your wonderful conglomerate of content, it sounds like.
That's it. Yeah, perfect.
That's right, indeed. So my goodness, so speaking of wonderful content, you mentioned this interrogation technique, and I know that's probably going to be really useful for the folks listening who may be writing, especially those aspiring to write novels and they may have characters. So my goodness, so what inspired this technique and what to expect from it?
Okay, what inspired it? As my career, which I mentioned earlier, shifted more to the teaching, a lot of things happen if you do that. If anybody chooses to teach what they know, first of all, you're going to learn more. And also, you're going to learn that you don't know as much as you thought you did. But when there's one specific thing about teaching, it's very critical. I can, as a director, achieve something. I can work with an actor and you go, wow, that was great how that performance turned out. That's fine. Now try to teach somebody else how to do that, which means you have to understand what the hell you did. What did you do? And a lot of teaching, like a lot of writing, it's like teaching writing too, is by instinct. I don't know. Why did I choose that? I don't know. I had why did I have that character say that? Why did I decide she should have a streak of red hair? I don't know. It seemed right because we're working out of instinct and intuition. Now, teaching, you have to be able to explain those techniques. So in the process of teaching over years, in terms of working with actors, this very simple, but it's not simple at all, way of working with actors and getting the performance you want, getting the character you want, and getting it to really look and be authentic. That's tricky. That's hard. So I kept thinking, there's got to be a better way. I would keep teaching it. I said, there's got to be a better way. Now, my whole background and training in theater was highly experimental, highly improvisational. That was my training, not traditional theater per se, but especially at Yale was, to think outside the box and keep creating and even defying the norms of the way other people do that. So I had the audacity and fortunately enough skills to be able to try new things while I'm teaching. I come up with an idea sometimes in the middle of a class and I try something new. So this is me actually directing all the time now, trying something new to see if it worked. And one day I was teaching in Amsterdam and I was working with these 8 very skilled directors. We're in this workshop at this institute there, sort of like the Sundance Institute in Amsterdam. And I'm watching a director work with a couple of actors, and he's struggling, and the actors are struggling. We're all struggling. That's sort of part of the nature of what we're doing, struggling. And finally, I heard myself say to him, I said, Johan, I'll tell you what, stop directing the actor. Try directing the character. And as those words came out of me, this has happened so many times in my career, those words come out of me and I'm going, where the hell did that come from? but I'm also knowing simultaneously, and I'm sure you know this, Dom, because you're a creative guy, that you go, this is good. I don't know where it came from. I'm not even sure quite what it means, but hang on to it, because if you can hang on to it, you'll discover something. So I confidently said, yeah, no, just do that, as if I had done it millions of times myself. And he said to me, how do you do that? How do you direct the character? I said, okay, let me show you. Now I'm really on a high wire act. And this one actress, I started just talking to her about her character. Not about the character. I started talking to her character, addressing her only as the character's name. And we talked for a while, and it became more interesting. And you could see her settle into the character. We did the scene again. The scene was better. And then a little bit later in that workshop, because I had to keep demonstrating this way, I started talking to one of the characters, and then I just got bold. And I started not just talking to the characters and interviewing the characters, or I started literally interrogating, challenging the character. Or you think you're that good? You think your husband really loves you? What makes you think your husband loves you? And I would pin them and I would push them against a wall, the character, not the actor. And they would come out fighting, screaming, confused, or whatever. And what you could see under the pressure of interrogation, you could literally see this character emerge ferociously, defending itself or discovering itself or whatever. And we would sit there in the room and go, oh my God, where did that come from? And ironically, Dom, the actors had the same response. The actor who was being interrogated would go, I don't know where that came from. I said, no, that's fine. You don't have to. And I realized that what I was doing was I was overpowering the actor's instinct, which is totally understandable, to take control of the character. The actor thinks I have to create the character. My way of working is, no, you don't. You just have to get out of the way. The character is in you. If you get out of the way, the character will come out. And some of the actors say, yeah, but what about all the work I've done and preparation work I've done on the character? I said, that's fine. But just don't you make the choice of what you're going to use. Let the character choose. Oh, okay. So it's an interesting transition. And now it's become a very powerful technique, especially when I've done it with writers, because I consult on a lot of writing projects, mostly screenplays, but novels and memoirs and other things. But even in a screenplay, you've got all those characters that they've written. And who are these characters? How well does the writer really know that character? And I've discovered usually not very well. They know them well enough to be able to construct the story. They have created characters that serve their purpose, the writer's purpose. I need a character. I need the strong wife who's going to dominate the husband. Okay, fine. It sounds very cliche, and it sounds very not that multidimensional at all. Who is this woman who thinks she has to dominate the husband, and why? Why is she acting like Lady Macbeth? Blah, blah, blah. So lots of times when Elsa and I are consulting with a screenwriter, we'll say, okay. And we explain to them what we're going to do. And they'll go, okay. And then let's say that wife's name is Sheila, the one I just made up. And I say to the writer, okay, I want to talk to Sheila. Now, it's a male writer, whatever. Sheila is a woman in her 30s. It's a male writer in his 60s. There's no deep connection relationship in terms of age and gender, maybe even life experience. I said, yeah, I want to talk to Sheila because Sheila exists. My belief is that character exists fully formed inside that writer. But he's been so determined to keep creating and molding her that she can't move. She's under his pressure. So I start talking to Sheila, and I start talking to Sheila about her husband and all that. And he'll respond as Sheila, perfectly as Sheila. Nobody has trouble with that. It's actually relatively easy on their part. But then the Sheila starts to emerge. Then the Sheila, and I may even ask Sheila, I said, what is it with you and your husband? Do you really think he's as weak as you treat him? I mean, come on, he's a strong guy. No, he's not. Yeah, he's a lot stronger than you are. Are you jealous of him? Now I start asking these questions. I'm pinning, and suddenly you'll see the Sheila that's been living inside this writer come out. Now, when we do this, often we record it, just audio and video, so we can give it back to the writer. But when it's done, now maybe that's just one character that's come out that we've done, usually the writer's response is, oh, I had no idea. I created this character. I had no idea who she was. I don't know where that came from. And I say, good, you don't need to know. Don't try to figure out. If you start trying to figure out where it came from, you're going to mess up the process. Just accept her. Accept her as she is. Accept her as she comes out. If you want to change something about the character, you're free to do that. That's your job. But don't try to figure it out. Don't do that. Let her out. And then when we do that, and we do it with one writer, 2 or 3 characters, let's say a mother and a father and a son or something like that, we got a whole family constellation. It's amazing what comes out. What's really amazing, we did this because we travel all over the world, and we're in Australia and New Zealand a lot. We did this in Australia at a film school where I was teaching, and Elsa and I are doing the consultations. And we're doing consultations on screenplays there, and the school decides which screenplays or students we're going to work with. But one of these is not a student. He teaches screenwriting, and he wants a consultation with us. Like, oh, this is going to be really interesting. And we did this process with him, and it was a female protagonist. I remember that, who was very macho and just very mean and cruel, whatever, it doesn't matter. And we did this interrogation, and the writer, his name is Simon, afterwards, when it was all over, he went, he says, I teach this stuff. You think I would know this? You think I would? I can't believe this. He says, I'm teaching this stuff and I don't know this. I go, well, okay. I said, now you do. And I think now he uses this a bit even in his teaching. So one little side note, Dom, about this process, which is fascinating. Again, I was teaching it at somewhere overseas in a master class. And one of the students, and there were a lot of students there who were filmmakers, but a lot of people who just were invited. There was a lot of people there from the community. And one man was a pilot, and he teaches flying. I didn't know him at all. His name is Bruce. I met him later. And he saw the whole process. And during the lunch break, he came up to me and he says, I know what you're doing, I know exactly what you're doing. Now, this is, if you've ever done any teaching, this is a moment of abject fear. This is the fear. This is the imposter syndrome. Oh my God, he sees through it. He realizes I have no idea what I'm talking about, that I'm making all this stuff up. I go, this is going to be embarrassing. And there are other friends of mine there and other students sitting there. I said, okay, Bruce, what am I doing? He says, I teach people how to fly. I go, okay. He says, and when you're flying, I mean, you have to be very concentrated. Short-term memory. Short-term memory, what he means by this, Dom, is short-term memory, how much your brain can hold in a moment, like right now, in this moment. Not short-term like in the past hour. No, in this moment, the shortest possible memory span, in this moment. Your brain can hold, and this is what he did, about 8 things. He held up 8 fingers, maximum 8 things. And what I teach my pilot students is that out of those 8 things, 4 of them better be about the airplane. And I'm thinking, good idea. He's the pilot. I go, okay, that's good. And he said, the other 4 can be something else, but those 4 of them. He says, what you're doing with that interrogation thing, you are replacing probably as much as 6 of those things. They start out 8 things is the actor, and you're replacing it. So 6 of those things are the character. And there's only about 2 things that the actor gets to hold on to. 2 things. And I go, yeah. He says, that's what you're doing. He says, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. And he says, that's why the actors can come out of it afterwards and they're fine. But while they're in it, they're totally the character or the writer. The same thing for the writer. Now, I have an offer to make to you, Dom. You and your brilliant listeners who, for whatever reasons, are interested in storytelling, writing, being authors, or anything like that. And my offer, which I make occasionally, to if people want to learn more about this, in other words, serious writers, or if there are directors out there too, same with it, but it's really serious, and I mean serious. It's serious enough that if you want to take advantage of this offer, you're going to have to write to me first. I'm going to ask you a few questions. You're going to write back, and then the offer will activate. The offer is a half an hour free consultation with me. You get that on whatever you need to talk about, whatever you want to talk about. You want to talk about this process or any other part of writing or directing. I'll give you that. All you have to do is go to my website, which is TIFI, Travis International Film Institute.us, TIFI.us. And there you'll find a contact that you can, with my email, you can write to me, but you have to do something really important so you get this offer. You have to mention Dom Brightmon, and you have to mention Going North so that I know where you come from, because I know, yes, I gave this offer here. Then you get that half hour, you can get that half hour free consultation with me, and I'd be happy to discuss this more with you or help you with whatever issues you have. That's my offer to you. Now, Dom, you can do that anytime because you know how to find me.
Hey, he's definitely right. And folks should definitely take advantage of that offer indeed, because you just heard just a snippet of what to expect from the mighty Mark himself and why my man is world renowned indeed. That's right, indeed, because that's definitely next level thinking, because, hey, that one trick alone, it's bringing out the character, and it's like, wow, making it real and authenticity on level 99 for nowadays.
Yeah. And to go one little step further, Dom, for the writers, we teach a course called Meet Your Characters, which is basically for writers. But in that, where we're teaching you not only how to do the interrogation process, because you need to learn it, but you can. But what writers that we've worked with do now is they're working on a project. They have a novel, they have a screenplay, whatever it is, and they have a cast of characters. Maybe it's just an idea, or maybe there's a first draft, it's done, doesn't matter. How to gather together a group of actors. And actors are the best people to work with because they know how to do this. 3 or 4 or 5 actors, and interrogate them. And suddenly in your living room or wherever you are, you have your characters there. And you can put them in any situation you want. You could say, let's say it's a husband and a wife and 2 children. You say, okay, it's the oldest child, whatever her name is, Lucy's, it's her birthday. And here's the situation. And you can put them into an improvisation. You can actually see how your characters are responding to different situations, different information, different events that happen, like the death of one character. See how they're responding. So you actually get to meet your characters, and you get to talk to your characters, and they get to talk to you. It's a very, very, very powerful technique.
Amen to that. Actually, kind of reminds me of if I'm not mistaken, I think even Napoleon Hill probably did a form of this in Think and Grow Rich, where he actually pictured certain characters like successful people around him. So it's like, it makes perfect sense how this is so applicable to not just directing, but also writing.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it's applicable to any kind of creative process, but especially anything where you're creating characters. Or to give you another example, I've worked with a lot of people who are writing a memoir. Now, the character they're writing about is themselves, but it's not themselves because it's themselves 10, 15, or 20 years ago, whenever that scene was. So now they are meeting their former self and sometimes surprised at what comes out from there. It's very powerful.
Powerful indeed. Powerful indeed. So my goodness. So for those who are like, oh my gosh, this interrogation technique took me to the next level. Like, man, like, is there a way to helpfully get my book to bestseller for at least a week so I can claim the status?
Wait a minute. Oh, do you want to know how to do the bestseller thing?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I do not recommend this way, but I'll tell you how I did it.
Okay.
But this was not a plan. I had been writing the book, as I said before, for about 2 years. Now it was finished. One little thing, Dom, that you'll appreciate. The book was finished. I was looking at the galleys of it. And during that part of the process, and it was about to go to print. It was just waiting for me to say, yes, okay, go. And I realized, because this is a how-to book, that there was something in there, lurking in there, that I had not made clear. Certain steps of the process. And so I told Michael, I said, I need some more time. I need to read. He says, no. I said, I was almost a year beyond the agreement already. But so it got delayed. So the publication got, finally, it was getting ready to get published. Meanwhile, because my father had passed away, I was, in his honor, going to do the bicycle ride from San Francisco to Los Angeles with a large group, a big organized group. And I'd been training for a lot of time. I'd done about 2,000 miles of training so that I could handle 100 miles a day on a bike. And I was doing fine. To make a very long story short, I had a very bad accident. I wasn't hit by a car or anything, but I lost control of the bike and went over the handlebars. And the first thing that hit the ground was my head. I ended up in the hospital. I was in a coma. There were rumors that I would not survive, but I did, obviously. And so I went through a very, very bad time. Then I was in the hospital for weeks in recovery, physical therapy, brain therapy, which is really interesting. And I came home, and my wife brought me home, and I knew about this, sitting on the dining room table was my book, fully published, a copy of my book sitting there. And I knew it. I had seen it before the accident. And I looked at that, and I remember thinking, because the amount of brain damage I had was extensive, thinking, well, I'm glad you're done, because I couldn't do you now. There's no way. I can't help you anymore. That book was done. Meanwhile, plans were being made for a book signing at a very famous bookstore in Los Angeles called Book Soup. So I was scheduled there, and notification went out to my whole list, and the publishers announced it and all that. Went to the book signing. Now, the book signing, I have pictures of me, and my hair is about that long because my head had been shaved. So I know it wasn't that long after I got out of the hospital. I was able to go to the book signing, went to the book signing, and a lot of my friends were there. And mainly, I think a lot of them were there, to celebrate Mark having written a book, but Mark survived a severe accident. A lot of these people who were there had visited me in the hospital and all that, had been in touch with me, but now this was sort of it was as much a public showing of me as it was of the book, but I just wanted it to be about the book. I didn't care about them. So I did the traditional book signing thing. Next morning, I started to get phone calls. I think it was the next morning or 2 days later. Forget what day it was. Just a couple of days later. How did you do that? I said, what are you talking about? You're on the bestseller list. I said, what? You're on the bestseller list. And I looked at the LA Times, and there I am, #1 bestseller on that little chart that they put out for nonfiction. I couldn't figure that out for the life of me. So I checked to find out that what a publication like the LA Times will do every week, they have people who call around to all the bookstores, not all of them, but a lot of them, to see what books they have sold. What are your book sales? So we can do a bestseller list. Fortunately, they had called Book Soup. Fortunately, all my friends had shown up. Fortunately, they bought out the store. I don't know, there's like 75 books. So I sold 75 copies of that book in one day or that week, which puts me on the bestseller list for a moment. Next week, gone. I'm not on the bestseller list anymore. So that's the way to do it. Have a near-death experience. See if you get all your friends to show up. That's how it happened. But I get to say bestseller, so there you go. Number one, I get to say number one bestseller.
There you go. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. That's how you get to the top of the mountain, baby.
Yeah. Get attention. Well, get your friends. The thing is, get your friends. They're your best support system. Your best support system.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Well, two more questions and I'll let my man escape. That's to know my man's time is valuable. So my goodness, you've been on a boatload of interviews and you have a whole bunch of wisdom to share and wisdom that you've gained over the years. Is there a question that you wish folks would ask you more often when you're in the guest side of the game on these podcasts?
That's a great question, Dom. A question I would like, which I'm assuming you're thinking of questions that's not asked often. I think the most important question for an artist, writer, director, actor, whatever any of us are, is a question I'm always struggling with too, is how do you survive in two ways? How do you survive financially? How do you survive artistically too, without compromising? And I think that's so it's a tough question. I think if anybody asks me that, I'm going to struggle with it. And the best answer I have to that right now, what I'm doing right now, which gets back to my legacy project and all those other things I talked about, is focus on the day. Focus on one day. That day being today. Because if you get too caught up with what I'm going to do in the next few months, weeks, months, my 5-year plan, you can have a 5-year plan, you can have a 10-year plan and all that, but it means nothing if you don't have an idea of what you want to achieve today. Even like my day today, I'll tell you, my day today, do you know what my day today is? Sleep. Do this podcast, which I'm grateful to be doing. But a lot of it's sleep because I have overstressed myself, overexhausted myself with some physical activity like running and other things I've done. I need the rest. So be very clear about what you're going to do that day that will take you one step closer to where you're going or prepare you for what's coming up. Say, okay, I got this big thing coming up. How can I best prepare? Short-term plans, which will lead to long-terms. And the other is trust and rely on those the closest to you, your friends and family and all of that. They will give you the world's worst criticism and the best criticism. Sometimes it's the same criticism, but listen to it.
Never heard it said that way before. Said so beautifully indeed. It could be the best and the worst criticism. Sometimes it's the same thing.
Yeah, and sometimes it's a month later. You say, that was a good idea. Why didn't I listen back then? Well, you weren't prepared to hear it back then. That's all. That's all.
Solid gold truth right there. Solid gold truth indeed. So my goodness, coming down to the question that every guest gets to receive, and that is if you wake up tomorrow and you're 25 again, but you're still in the year of 2023, what advice would you give to yourself?
The advice is beware. Be aware of arrogance. Beware of certainty that you know everything. And also beware of assumptions. Assuming you know something, assuming you got it all figured out. Even for a writer, say writing a book, a story, novel, whatever. Assuming you know how the book's going to turn out. Assuming you know anything. I think our assumptions about what's happening can get in the way of what is really happening. My approach to life and creativity is very, very simple. Virginia Woolf said, our job in life is to manage the things that come our way. That's very simple. Manage the things that come our way. But when you think about that advice, you say, okay, there are those, quote, things that are coming my way. Now, if you're listening to this broadcast, well, this is one thing that came your way was this broadcast. Manage the things that come your way, but realize that the universe is always somehow putting things in front of you. You're moving on a path, going to some place, wherever you're going, but things will come your way. Manage them. Understand that most likely every single thing that comes your way is there for a good reason. As painful as that thing might be, it's there for a good reason. Can you step back from it for a moment and give it time, give it space? And just like you said, Don, with the advice being either helpful or not helpful, sometimes we don't realize that advice from someone else, how helpful it is until a while later. Okay, fine. Give it time. Maybe. And allow yourself. Don't be so arrogant. Oh, he doesn't know what he's talking about. They don't know what they're talking about. I know what I'm doing. You may think you know what you're doing, but that's an assumption. Step back, relax, let the universe, let the rest of the world, let those people close to you, let them in. Don't try to keep them out. Let them in. And trust yourself that what is useful and supportive and advantageous to you, you will use. And what is not advantageous to you, you won't throw away. You'll just put it to the side for the moment. You'll manage it, put it over there. Maybe later I'll realize that that piece of advice is useful and I will use it.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. That's right, indeed. A couple more cards to add to the deck of wisdom today, y'all. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. Got it from the mighty Mark today, y'all. That's right. Be aware, y'all. That's right. Beware of sometimes ego can get in the way, especially in the younger days of the millennials and the Gen Zs, especially since me being a millennial, one of the older millennials in a way.
I like that, an older millennial.
Yeah, because there's a difference. There's the tail end where they could still know what a rotary phone is, and then the ones that came after where they're like, oh, American Online, that's a thing? Oh my goodness, I didn't have dial-up growing up. I didn't know what that meant.
Right.
Oh, man, but folks need to dial up metaphorically to your website and keep in contact with you and keep up with all the content that you're going to be dropping indeed. So if folks need to do that one more time, where can folks find it?
The best place to find me is at the website, TIFI, Travis International Film Institute, TIFI.US. Now, that's where you can see a lot about all the work we do, the courses we offer, the books that I've mentioned, the videos. A lot of the videos are on there. They're all free. You can watch all those videos. And through that website, you can get in touch with us, get in touch with me and Elsha, and you can write to us. That's all you need to get started. Get in touch with it. Then beyond that, there's a lot more that we can offer you. Not everything is on the website because there's just not enough room to put up everything, but it's a lot there. There's a lot there.
So you heard it from the professor, y'all. That's right, indeed. Head over to his website, leave some virtual apples on his virtual desk, y'all. That's right, indeed. For all this good work my man is doing, indeed. That's right, indeed, because it's some good stuff, indeed. So take that day one day at a time. That's right. Focus on the day and not just the whole year once, because a lot of days are ahead for the folks listening. I hope, indeed. So that's right. So stay locked in. That's right. Stay locked in indeed. So any parting words before we close up shop, Mark?
No, the offer is out there, which I gave you earlier. I look forward to hearing from any of you. You want to write, contact me through the website. And that half-hour free consultation for the serious writers, serious questions. Be prepared for what you want. Don't think, oh, I'd like to talk to you. That's not enough. Here's my question. Here's where I'm having trouble. Directing, writing, acting. Here's my question. Let me know what that is, and then we can make an arrangement. I would love to meet you, would love to hear from you. And on that, just have a terrific, creative day today.
Thanks a bunch for gifting us with your time and your ears to this podcast. If you want to make yourself even more super special awesome, like, subscribe, and share this with somebody that you care about and spread the word so that way we can get this show out to as many people as possible and encourage them and inspire them to one day become published authors of their own and join the business of immortality. advance others to advance yourself.